Hey there, welcome to my video. My name is Marley and I like to read. Today I'm going to be doing my December wrap up, so the last wrap up of 2021, talking about all the books that I read, and I ended up reading 13 in December, although technically a bunch of them are part of a manga series, so it's kind of like I only read 8, and I capped off the year with 113 books, I think it was. So pretty good, pretty proud of myself. Best reading year I've ever had. Stay tuned, subscribe, see if I can do it again. As always, I'm going to talk about the books in the order of the lowest rated to the highest rated, so stay tuned to see what my favorite book of the month was. Most of these books were featured in vlogs, so sorry if this gets repetitive. Next year I'm gonna do less vlogs, less videos in general, so it just won't be as repetitive here. So let's start out with a book I read for my Reading Indigo's Best Books of the Year video, which was The Other Black Girl by Zakiya Dalila Harris. This is a pretty popular book you may have heard of. It is about this black girl named Nella who works at this really well-off publishing company in, I think it's New York. Because she is the only Black person at her workplace, she does feel like there's a lot of microaggressions and things like that in the workplace. And then this new girl starts named Hazel, and she is also Black, so Nella's very excited to have someone that she can sort of bond with over those things. However, the vibes start to get a little bit off with this new girl Hazel, and then Nella starts to, I think it's Nella, hopefully I'm saying the right name. Then she starts to receive these mysterious notes on her desk telling her to leave the publishing house like right away. She takes them to be kind of threatening. And so it's kind of like about her trying to figure out who is sending her these notes and why. And it deals a lot with racism and like anti-Black racism specifically, as you can imagine. I only gave this 3 stars. And that was potentially being generous. I just found this was a very, very slow book. Basically, the whole summary takes place for the first 2/3 of the book, and then you get into kind of like more action. Super slow and very like weird. I will say I'm glad it didn't go in the direction that I thought it would exactly. And I kind of like the little twist ending that it had. But overall, I just found it not very enjoyable, and I didn't really enjoy the main character, which I know you don't always have to enjoy the main character, especially in like thrillers, but yeah, just kind of not, just wouldn't recommend. Next up we have The Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulley. This is a YA mystery book, but the mystery kind of sucks. So this is about, I think her name was Donis, and she is a part of the Ojibwe tribe in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. She's like half native, half white, so she kind of is like pulled in different directions because of that, but she's very involved in her tribe and in the community. And then some tragedy strikes her life and strikes the tribe. She finds out that there is this like drug, this mystery drug that is being spread throughout her community. It's killing people, it's causing a lot of tragedy, and then she kind of teams up with some investigators to figure out what is going on and, you know, solve it. I think the premise sounds really good, and I think it was a good premise to start with. I really enjoyed hearing more about like native tribes and their traditions that they had in her tribe and stuff like that. I really think that was neat. I think that was cool, but everything else just sort of was a flop for me at the end of the day. There was a romance in it, which I ended up not liking that much. The main character, again, started to get annoying. She would find things out about the mystery and then do nothing about it. She wouldn't tell the people she was working with, and then it just led to like worse things happening. The mystery, like I kind of figured out what was happening, like who was involved. So again, just not really the best for me, but I see why people would like it for those cultural aspects. Next up, we have Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. I was really sad that this only got a 3-star from me, but as I said in that vlog where I read it, I think I made the mistake of reading it too close to his other book, House in the Cerulean Sea, because they are just so similar. I just couldn't enjoy it as much. But this is about this man Wallace, who is a very like mean lawyer, has a pretty miserable life, but that's because he like doesn't treat people very well. And then he has a heart attack and dies, and then this Reaper girl appears and like tells him that he's dead and takes him to this tea shop where there's this guy named Hugo who's apparently going to like help him cross over kind of thing and help him come to terms with his death and with his life. He ends up staying there for quite a while because he really bonds with a bunch of the characters that are living there at the tea shop. He gets like a romance with Hugo. There's a lot of cute, sweet moments between this sort of found family, and it's nice to see Wallace's character development. However, again, this book was just a little too slow and boring for me. And then again, the ending was just kind of like predictable, cheesy. I don't know. It wasn't a standout for me. If you're gonna read any of his books, read House on the Cerulean Sea. Then we have a 4-star read, and that was I always want to say The Secret Life. The Invisible Life of Addie Larue by V.E. Schwab. This was a really, really beautiful book. It's an adult fantasy, but the fantasy is very light, so I wouldn't really worry about that. But it is about this girl named Addie Larue. She was born in like the 1700s, 1600s kind of time. She didn't like the lack of freedom that she had as a woman during that time. So on the night of her like arranged marriage, she runs away, begs the gods like, please don't make me get married. I don't want this life. I just want to be free. A certain god responds to her, but as she was told, you should not listen to the gods who respond at night. Basically, he's kind of like the devil that responds to her. He is willing to make a deal with her for her supposed like freedom, and then her soul will like belong to him when she eventually dies. So she makes a deal, and it ends up being actually a curse where no one can remember her and she cannot make an impact on the world. So all of her friends and family don't remember her, but also any new people she meets just instantly kind of forget about her when she leaves the room. So this is obviously very difficult life to live, but she is immortal and can live forever. So we're following her life throughout the many centuries. Present day, we are also seeing this man named Henry who she meets, and he actually does remember her. Then we're trying to, see why is he the only one that remembers her. As you can imagine, there's a bit of a romance there. It's a really interesting premise, and I think that V.E. Schwab did a really good job with it. I do think it was a little bit predictable. I could see where it was going, but I think the characters and the whole story just make it really worth it. I just didn't give it 5 stars because, I don't know, it was just lacking that it factor for me. I'm honestly thinking that maybe I can't give any books 5 stars unless they're thrillers. No, actually that's not true because there's something I'm going to talk about later. But yeah, there was just something missing, but still a really, really good book that I would highly recommend. Then we have Not a Happy Family by Shari Lapena. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. So this is following obviously a family. They are very rich, very well off. It's the 2 parents, and they have 3 kids who are now adults and have their own kind of lives now. But they all gather for a family event, and the dad ends up basically pissing off all of the kids. He's a really cruel man. And then the next day, the parents end up murdered. They're found dead in their home. And so then it is a murder mystery of who killed them, and the 3 kids are kind of the main suspects because they are going to inherit a lot of money from their parents' death, and obviously like they just were all pissed off by the parents. There's a couple other suspects in here as well, a couple other points of views, but this is very much similar to Shari Lapena's other books. There's just this mystery, and it's a bunch of different characters all talking to each other, a bunch of reveals coming out throughout the book. You're able to make a lot of theories throughout of everyone who you think might have done it. So if you're into those types of thrillers that have the whodunit sort of thing, then I highly recommend I say all of her books. I've only read 2, but I think this is sort of her thing. This one was really good. Again, I only took 0.5 off because I was a little bit disappointed with who actually ended up being the killer, but I think the whole rest of the book makes it worth it still. I read it in a night, so. Next up we have The Promised Neverland manga series. So I read volumes 5 to 9. No, I read volume 10. Where is volume 10? Volumes 5 to 10 this month. So that makes up quite a chunk of my reading. But I gave most of these books all 4 stars, and then I gave the 9th volume 5 stars. All the previous volumes I had given 5. So this is manga, obviously, and it is about a orphanage called Gracefield House. We're following a bunch of children there. They find out that this orphanage is not what they seem. Their siblings, the other kids, are not actually getting adopted. Something more dark and horrifying is actually happening to these kids. The 3 older children and the smartest children there kind of take on finding out what is actually going on and scheming to try and escape this orphanage. Now, I've come quite a long way from that premise in these volumes. It definitely has a major kind of like change to the story, and that is ultimately why I rated these books a little bit lower than the first couple, because it doesn't really have that same scheming aspect. There's not as many twists that are happening, but I still am really enjoying it. It's kind of just more adventurous and actiony now. But the 9th volume had a good twist, and that's why I still gave that one 5. But yeah, I really recommend this series if you're into reading manga or graphic novels. I haven't read very much, but I'm just flying through this one. So yeah, I look forward to continuing it in the new year as well. Then we have a 5-star read, and that is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune, which I had mentioned earlier. This is about a character who is kind of similar to the Wallace character in Under the Whispering Door, but he is very like by the rules, like doesn't really have much of a life, kind of boring and rigid and that kind of thing. He works for the Department of Magical Youth, I think it was called, something like that. It is a fantasy. So his job is to go visit these magical orphanages and make sure that everything's running well and everything. So then his bosses put him up to this task to go to this special house that is for more like dangerous kids that have more like dangerous powers. So he goes, it is the house in the Cerulean Sea. He just ends up like falling in love with these kids, really bonding with them. They help him loosen up and learn to enjoy life and learn that you don't always have to go by the book all the time. And it's just like a found family trope. So you can see why it's similar to Under the Whispering Door, but it's just better because it's more fun and like the kids just make it more fun, I think. There's also a romance as well. It's just like a very heartwarming, funny story that I really recommend. That's all there is to it. Then for my favorite book of the month, that is going to be The Push by Ashley Audrain. This is kind of like a mystery drama. It is about this woman who marries this man. They have a nice marriage, whatever. She ends up getting pregnant, and that's where things kind of start going downhill. She doesn't have a great pregnancy or birthing experience, and she starts to kind of like have animosity towards her kid and think that the kid is evil and is doing these malicious things. But then you don't know if it's a reliable narrator or not, because we're also seeing flashbacks to her mom and her grandmother, and there seems to be a history of mental illness and abuse with all of the women in her family. So you're kind of wondering if like it's just her coming up with these ideas in her head and her daughter is actually innocent and she is just like projecting these things onto her kid. What is the answer? I cannot say, but it was just so gripping. Super short chapters, super like amazing writing where you just want to keep reading. Definitely has some like commentary on like what women have to go through as mothers and just in general, a lot of like fears that you might have as a parent, those types of topics. So not necessarily an easy read in that regard if you maybe had a bad experience giving birth or with postpartum depression or something like that, but really amazing book. Love the twist. Love it all. So yeah, that was my reading month in December. Let me know if you read any of these, and be sure to subscribe for more videos this year. I'm going to be uploading less, as I mentioned, but don't worry, I'll still be here. So hope you all had a great new year, and until next time, bye.